So first, the headlines. Here is what we know. We know that we do not yet have the final results of the presidential election. The presidency is not decided by the popular vote. You know this. It's decided by the states. Each state has a number of electoral votes based on its population. California has the most at 55, and states that might be big but have small populations have the fewest, like North Dakota that only has 3. So right now, in this moment, we're waiting to learn the results in a few key states, and there is nothing unusual about this. The full official vote count for a state is never available on election night. I know, you're like, wait a minute, what? Never. When you hear the media calling a state for one candidate, that call is based on a complicated and usually very accurate estimate of the votes in that state. But the official count always takes a few days, sometimes a few weeks. And right now it's impossible to call those few key states because the margin of the vote is so slim. So in order to get it right, we must count every vote. Here's another headline. We know the president lied last night. When he claimed victory, the one thing of which we are certain is that we don't yet know the final result. So why do I start out by saying we're facing an emergency? I mean, the concern at this point is an attempt to throw out some of the votes, either those that have already been counted or those that are waiting to be counted. Why is that an emergency? Let's have a little talk. Just 10 months ago, this president was impeached, and no impeached American president has ever even sought re-election. During the past 7 months, nearly 250,000 Americans have perished in the coronavirus pandemic, and the response of this president has been casual to the point of cruelty. And last night, this president not only lied about the status of his election, he clearly indicated his willingness to undermine the very basis of democracy by calling for an abrupt halt to counting ballots in the remaining states, saying he would strip Americans of the power to choose their own president and instead hand that power over to the Supreme Court, a court where he has personally nominated 3 of the sitting justices. And that is an emergency. It's an emergency, and I don't say this to be partisan. I don't mean that it is always an emergency if Black people are facing a candidate who they may have voted against with an overwhelming percentage, and that candidate, doesn't win the election. I mean, that's a loss. Maybe it's even a disappointment, but it's not an emergency. It's not even necessarily an emergency because of cruelty or documented dishonesty or even catastrophic mortalities suffered under this administration. The emergency is why that seems to make so little difference to so many voters. These are issues which at every point for every other modern American president would have been disqualifying. Let's take Democrat Lyndon Johnson, who chose not to seek re-election in 1968 because he understood that Americans of both parties were enraged and prepared to hold him accountable for the casualties that were suffered in Vietnam. Yet it's almost certain that many American voters chose to ignore these issues because of the power of Black people.